other key thing that I want to touch on, and I think for all of you listening, how do you go about spotting opportunities? Because a great way to get started with AI is actually to find a small project with a high degree of success in your business unit, in your department, that you can implement, that can actually help you create some value and demonstrate that you can work with AI, but also teach you about how AI works and set you up for doing greater and bigger things with it. So a simple rule of thumb here is from Andrew Ning, who I mentioned earlier as being sort of the premier researcher and leader in this space to a large extent, who said that anything you can do with 1 second of thought, we can probably now or soon automate. And I think we can sometimes do more complicated tasks than this, but this is a very good rule of thumb. If a person can make that decision, given some information in a second or so, very, very likely that we can do the same thing with AI. It's worthwhile thinking about automating tasks rather than jobs. And in terms of where to look, there are some pain points in every business, in every department. Something that you're doing a lot that you would rather not be doing, or that's frustrating. Something that's not going as well as it should, where perhaps you need more quality control. So that tends to be a good area to look for a potential AI application. Other things are drivers of business value, and this requires a little bit more creative thought. But if you think about, as a manager, if I could be everywhere at the same time, what could I do to make the business better? Would I listen to every single client call and guide that call or give the employee feedback? Well, then potentially you can make an AI system to listen to your calls and to give light feedback while they're in progress. If you thought, well, I can reduce risk or I can do more cross-selling if I look at all my customer interactions, all the emails, well, you can do an AI system to do that and to actually go through those emails and to figure out when something when is a good time to propose a certain product or a certain suggestion. I mean, the same thing can do whatever your business function is. If you think about how you're adding value, the next step is think about, could I do more of that? Could I do it more accurately? Would that add more value? And then that brings us to this Venn diagram here at the end, which is really saying that to find AI opportunities, yes, you need the technical capabilities. They're important, but you don't need to have them yourselves. But what is also critical is having the business domain knowledge, and you will have that. So if you learn a little bit about AI, or if you bring someone in who has AI expertise, you can work together to brainstorm and to find opportunities where you can use this to make your lives better, to make your customers' lives better. And when you find opportunities, you can have a technical person just validate it and say, well, okay, these 3 opportunities that you found, this one is actually really easy to do. And then you might realize, there's our opportunity. There's our first pilot project that we want to get going with AI in our department. You don't need to be Google or IBM or any of the other big tech players to do AI. It helps if you have a lot of data, which most big companies do. And it helps if you understand that data. But the way to do that is really just to work with people who understand AI and to start doing AI, because that'll show you how to make your data better. And in terms of getting going and making progress with this, I mentioned brainstorming projects. I mentioned the getting data, and I think that's absolutely key, because companies often think that they have millions of data points. And then as a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, you look at the data and you realize, but actually for the problem they want to solve, they've only got 900 data points. And if they just start doing these few things differently, they can capture that data, and then the world will open up in terms of what they can do with AI. So the approach of starting a big data strategy where we're going to get all our data ready and 3 years from now we're going to do AI, you get 3 years down the line, and then the engineers tell you, listen, you haven't been capturing the right stuff for what we want to do. We're going to need to do this for another 3 years, then we can try again. Where if you start an AI project as soon as possible, you can then iterate on the data, and then you can get to having the right data and having valuable data that can set you apart from your competition very quickly. And I think as a last point, I want to encourage everyone, if you're interested, learn more about it. There are some great courses, AI for everyone on Coursera, data science for business, lots of introductory courses that aren't that technical, but that teach you about AI projects, how AI is used. And then there are technical courses if you're interested. I mean, those of you who want to get your hands dirty and build your own models, a great place to start is on Python, but it's by no means necessary to be able to build them yourself. And if there's interest, I think between Omanol and Novia 1, we'd be more than happy to put together some further, more in-depth training on the subject as well.
Great. So if I understand correctly, you say start small, pick some low-hanging fruit,
Yep.
either in the task process space or in a value generation space, and learn on the job, and things will unfold as you go along. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just help us understand the distinction now between if getting involved at a technical level or getting involved at a project management level. How do I think through that?
Okay, so yeah, I think an absolutely great way to learn more is to be part of a project. So if that means that you are helping define the requirements, if you're helping to test out the system, if you're actually leading the project, getting involved in that way will teach you more about AI, it will teach you more about the requirements, about the challenges, about what success you can get out of it. And that's really a good way for everyone to go at this point, because as I mentioned earlier, this scales with data, and data is not getting less, and neither is processing power. And I think the interest in research is just making more and more applications available. So AI is coming in a big wave, and you want to be riding that wave. So get involved where you can. It's an exciting area, and it can do a lot to improve what value you generate as a business. In terms of how to get involved, in terms of roles, so I think AI project manager is something that is going to become a fairly desired skill set, and that requires you to be in between the technical and the business side. So the more you learn about it, the more experience you get, the more you're able to actually run and execute and come up with AI projects, which is a skill set that is going to be valuable going forward, I suspect. The other side is those of you who are technical, who are involved in the engineering side. It's not that big of a step to go from being a computer scientist to being a machine learning engineer. Maybe it requires a bit more statistics, but less so than being a pure data scientist. And there's fantastic courses that the courses that focus on deep learning, I think, are particularly valuable. But learning the other techniques are incredibly useful as well. And yeah, I think learning more and learning about the areas that interest you is important, because it is very wide. There is a lot going on. And I can't, for instance, tell you that much about how to build a graph network. I haven't had to build one yet, and they're still quite rare, but at least I know what they're used for. And if I see an opportunity that requires a graph network, I can get that skill set, or I could probably just learn how to do it myself fairly easily, because I've got the base. But you can't know everything in AI. There's too much research being published to keep up with it all, even if one wanted to. But I think knowing the key areas, the broad applications, and reading about use cases and applications is going to keep your eyes open for where it can be used.
So tell me, how long or how big are these projects, or how small are they? And if you say you get involved in order to sort of shape your career into becoming an AI project manager, how long would it take me, or how many projects would it take me to become relatively proficient at bridging and managing?
So I think the how long is a project is definitely one of the interesting questions. And a big company might set out to do something like this, and it might take years, but that would be the wrong approach. I've done an AI project for a client in 6 days. That was a particularly stressful time of my life. It went live. I started the 1 week, it was live the next week, and I wouldn't want to do that again, but it does illustrate how quickly you can actually go through the process, build a prototype, iterate on the prototype, get it ready for production. And I think realistically, if you look at doing something in 6 months, that gives you enough time to get buy-in, it gives you enough time to get the data. You really shouldn't be taking longer than that, because then it's not being pushed hard enough. You probably don't have the right buy-in, and excitement will wane. I think it's worthwhile getting something started and looking within a period of 1 to 6 months to have something that is actually running using production live data that you can see results from, and then evaluate and then use that to create buy-in, to create interest. So these things can be much faster, even in large organizations, I think, than people expect. But having a sandbox environment and not being tied to all of the regular infrastructure definitely helps a lot. In terms of getting the necessary experience, so if you're doing the right learning, if you say have some experience in project management, if you have some technical understanding already, I would say a handful of projects would put you, being involved in a handful of projects would put you in a pretty good space. But definitely there's nothing that can substitute for actually running a project, and even a small project, beginning to end. And seeing everything that happens from when we discuss the initial idea, how we evaluate the business case, what happens when we start getting the data and working with the data, what things we need to solve along the way, and what the final results, or at least the interim results especially as well, and then the final results look like. Going through that cycle is I think, a key step in being able to run these projects.